So what you should have been able to do, if you're not already aware, is we should have been able to download or have access to a case study that was commissioned by BibliU in conjunction with Coventry University, and it was about the impact of e-resources on student outcomes, and that's what I'll be talking about today. I am going to keep it quite short. I'm not going to just talk through a case study. You'll be pleased to know the case study's there, and if you want the detail, it should be mostly in that case study. Of course, there is some sort of more granular detail that I'm happy to answer questions on a bit later. But just to kick things off, to make things a little bit more introducing, the price of not doing an icebreaker, as I usually call this, because everybody loves icebreakers, I'm sure, but I won't pain you with them today. The price is in chat. Some of you have already done some of this, but if you can just put your name, your institution, and I'm going to make you choose your favoured format, not your favourite necessarily, but your favoured format. And I mean print or digital when I say that. If anybody puts punched card, okay, I'm not going to be impressed. You're just too clever for your own good. So your favorite format, please, and then your favorite animal. So you can see my example there. I should say that my favorite animal is a cat, and my favorite format is print, obviously. So I have a printed cat. And despite my favorite animal being a cat, I seem to have one cat and two dogs for some reason. And it's not all my fault. So if you can be busy yourselves putting that in chat, and the rule is everybody has to do this. Okay, so whether you like it or not, you're just going to have to suck it up and get it done. And that will teach you to use chat, and that way you'll realize you can use a keyboard, and you might be more inclined to put a question or a comment into the chat. That's the thinking anyway, just to go behind the scenes. So what are we here to talk about? So really, I just wanted to give you a quick background about our Flying Start scheme. I know that some of you have already heard this before, so apologies, but it does give a bit of background about what we're trying to do as an institution for the last 10 years, and why we wanted to measure what the actual benefits have been in moving to electronic over print. So we had a scheme that was started 10 years ago, where we decided that we were giving all undergraduates at Coventry University their essential reading, mainly essential reading, but it could also be non-book materials, such as safety wear. I think PE students used to get their sports kit, which was a pain to get measured up and ordered, as you can probably imagine. But by and large, vast majority of the things that we did was about distributing core essential reading materials linked to a course of study to all undergraduates, okay, at all levels. And really that was done by course. We're a modular university, so we were doing it at a course level rather than a modular level, okay? So that meant that courses needed to think through all the different modules they were running and really focus on what their core teaching materials were for that course. So the essential reading was really given in print. So everything that we did in print. And it was the definition of a logistical nightmare, because we had a 2-week period at the beginning of every academic year where we were distributing, at the time, it was sort of 45,000 physical copies of texts to what could be sort of 20,000 students, all on different courses. So it was really very, very frantic activity, liaising with the publishers and the suppliers to get that done. We made the decision as an opportunity arose for us to decide whether or not to continue with print or flip to digital. And obviously we did flip to digital, and we had the buy-in of our faculty deans in that, and our university provost and vice chancellor were supportive of that decision. So it was a decision made at the top level of the university, And that's how we managed to combat some of the barriers that you can probably imagine we were experiencing. Well, my students prefer print. Well, couldn't some of them have digital and some of them have print if they fancy it? No, it's one or the other. So we made a format shift to digital only. And of course, there are always exceptions, but by their very definition, exceptions are exceptional. So I won't labour that, but there are some books which really are critical or essential to courses which can only be obtained in print at the moment, but we're working on those. So we obviously engaged in a tender activity and selected BibliU as our platform for delivery. And we decided to phase in our delivery so that people who'd been receiving books kept receiving books until they'd finished their course. And so over a 2-year period, we flipped to a fully digital model. So the thing that we'd never been able to do, and this is based obviously on a one-to-one ownership model. So we're not talking about concurrent licensing. We're not talking about rental over a period, so for a 1-year period. Every student who gets a copy of a book digitally gets to keep that in perpetuity. So they're able, when they leave the university, to register an email address with BibliU and continue to gain access to the books they've been given. Okay, so we're very much on message when it comes to the publishers wanting to extract every penny from us, and we'll get to that in a second. So, for example, last academic year, we distributed what would have been nearly 100,000 copies of books, 1,634 titles between 18,000 students. So that's kind of the scale we're operating at there. And the overall cost, because just to give you an idea of what that's looking at, it's about 3.5 million. The maximum is about 3.5 million per annum. It's been less for the last couple of years for a couple of different reasons. But roughly, when we add sort of some of our other activities into it, it comes to approximately 3.5 million in terms of the budget that I estimate each year. Clearly, we always hope, and we always estimate that we do very well on student numbers. So when we don't do quite so well on student numbers, those costs come down. But that's still a hell of a lot of money, as you can probably appreciate, to be spending on ebooks every year. And if you want to know a little bit more about the scheme, there's a URL there that will lead you to the Flying Start website about that. So what about the case study? And I hope some of you have been able to read the case study itself, or at least get a look at it. Really, the drivers for this were obviously, we were required by the Office for Students to be writing an access and participation plan. And this initiative, the Flying Start initiative, was a key part of the access and participation plan. And it is a key rationale for why we charge the higher fee band to students. So this is part of that measurable, sort of a very firm deliverable that we give to students. The idea being that we're leveling the playing field. Everybody should be getting the core reading that they need. There's no sort of concurrent access limits. There's no excuse basically for people not to have the resources that they need in terms of their study. But the one thing that we very much lacked when we were delivering via print was any kind of idea of engagement with the materials, any kind of measure of value for money. So when we were dishing out sort of 400 copies of Introduction to Business Management, we didn't know if any of those students were ever even cracking the spine of the book. Because whenever you ask them, oh, did you use the materials? Oh, of course we were. Yes, absolutely. We've been reading it every night. Of course we have. And so we can ask them, but we didn't actually have a definite metric beyond the anecdotal that there was any use. And certainly we obviously surveyed the students, and the students got back and said, yes, absolutely. We found it very useful to give all of our books for free. Well, for free, it's obviously wrapped into the fee they pay for tuition fee, but we didn't actually have a definite measure that we could attribute to the university as a whole, let alone get down to any kind of granular level, such as course or level or school level. So no data was available, and that was a problem for us. So we definitely wanted to move on, and that was definitely something that we wanted to do. And when Bibliu came to us and said, we've got the data from, you've got the data, the granular data from the platform that goes down to what every student's been reading, to the second, to the, how many pages they've been reading, quite a lot of really detailed data. What can we do with it? And we said, well, we need to join that up with our student data, so that we can then get an idea of what, not just the value for money, but to identify, as the APP, I think, intends for us to do, to see where there are gaps, if there are any groups of students who are being missed, who are not engaging, that we could try and engage with. And so for the case study itself, it has taken a while, but we managed to get agreement to use student data at Coventry, and that really included, from Coventry's side, the key student characteristics. So that is anything that you'd normally find in a registry record for a student. It does include Polar 4 data. It does include academic performance. So we had some time in terms of what kind of output we give for academic performance, because clearly it will differ depending on a course and a module score. But my colleagues in planning and statistics department of the university took care of that. And then we have you can imagine we've got a big file of data for student data, and then we were using the email address to join that data with the engagement stats that Bibliu provided. And obviously there are quite a lot of stats in there, but those are the things where on this slide that we were particularly interested in. And typically it's about engagement, number of visits, time used, reading session length, and also, interestingly, who's using the features. And by features, we mean sort of highlighting, read aloud, things like that, making notes within the text. Okay, so we're really interested in those types of parameters. So we made that join, and clearly the other thing that we did was anonymize the data once that join had been made. So we had that data, but we anonymized it at a very high level. So we weren't able to determine, nobody could then dip into the data and find out what Joe Blogs has or hasn't been looking at over time. It was very much at a higher level. Okay, so so we did that, and Green Shoots, who are the company that Bibliu have contracted to sort of do the crunching of the data and then report on it, then sort of came out with a high-level report and have basically summarized that into the report that you've got access to. So just to go over some of the key results that I think are, for us, have been very interesting anyway. So what have we found? I think the key things for us, I picked out 4 things I think we found most important. And clearly, we'll get on to correlation in a minute. But what we found is that on average, so people who are using text on Bibliu are producing a higher mean module mark than those that have never used the platform. So that's coming out at about 2.4%. So it is statistically significant, so just about significant. But that difference in attainment does increase when we look at other factors as well. So it's not just about whether they've used it or not, although that is a key factor. That difference in attainment increases with higher usage. So for example, here, where we've got students who've had 50 plus visits to the platform, we can see that then they've got a 4.3% higher mean module mark. And again, difference in attainment with a number of texts that are allocated for a particular course. So where there are courses that have got 4 texts allocated to them on the platform rather than say just 1, we see again that there's a higher module mark. And there's also a difference in attainment for those that are using the platform, a difference in attainment when it comes to heavy feature use as well. So 2% higher mean module mark for those that are using the features that are sort of that are part of that. Linked to that, which hasn't come from this survey, we do survey students separately, and the data that we were using for this was at a very early stage in our relationship with BibliU. So this was data from, I think it was a 2019-2020 academic year. So that was a couple of years ago, and I've got something about that a bit later. We also survey the students anyway. So we've asked the students separately on a survey that we do internally to the university to make some comments about what they felt. And I think this is kinds of supports what we're doing in a way, certainly around affordability, and if they felt it helped them. So broadly speaking, we can see that the books that we make available through BibliU have, through the platform, have had a positive effect on the students overall. So whether it's been because they felt that they wouldn't be able to afford to buy them otherwise, whether it's because they've felt that it's helped them study and it's therefore had a positive effect on their satisfaction, that's sort of I think had an effect on them as well. So that's a positive thing for us. So overall, what have we discovered? And I suppose really we can say that there is a correlation between use of the platform and attainment from statistically, and engagement equals success. So we can see that the differences in the difference in engagement does correlate with an improved performance academically. And I think the key thing for us is that this is we have quantitative evidence of engagement. So the fact we've actually got some data that we can use and say and attach to attainment, attached to just say this number of these students are actually engaging. These students are sort of looking at the resources we are using or not, because there are some students who aren't. So we do use that as well. So where there are students who aren't engaging, we are looking at that data in year and towards the end of year, and using that as a driver to have discussions with course colleagues, course leads, and saying, well, not a lot of people looked at this book. Therefore, do you want to change your adoption? Do you want to, or are you going to change your teaching? Are you going to, where we have that good success is where, shock horror, lecturers use the core reading within their teaching. So within their pedagogy, if they're referring to regularly and using their reading within and referring to it regularly, then we find there's more engagement with the platform. So the impact of that has been measurable, where we've not had that before. But obviously, Dave would probably love me to say there's causation here, but correlation is not causation. We know that. So these people aren't necessarily achieving more just because of BibliU, but I think that there is a link. There is definitely a linkage with platform. It's about what that measure is, and we can hypothesize about what is happening there that is making the students either appreciate what we're doing or engage with materials more. And the data that we've produced, I do appreciate, does need updating, and our stats and planning team are busy trying to, well, I like to think they're busy. I'm sure they are busy as we speak, probably pulling out the data for this past academic year and linking that with the student records to do something similar. And one of the benefits that we can do, as I said, is look at some of those other factors and talk about, so for example, when we look at those satisfaction ratings, we can determine whether or not they are people who are in the more deprived pool of 4 categories, whether they think they are sort of it's helping them more, or whether they're retaining more. And similarly, we can do that with gender and with ethnicity as well. So coming to the sort of little bit of an elephant in the room, engagement is equals attainment, so what? I think this is something we all know anyway, in that, of course, if a student engages, they're more likely to retain, whether it's on Bibliu's platform, whether it's with a physical resource, whether it's with their course in general. Engagement, what we do know is engagement in general, academically, does increase the chances of attainment, does ensure students achieve more. So that's not news, I suppose. But for me personally, what the argument that we would be using, and we have been using internally, is that absolutely engagement is equals attainment. But what we are seeing is that there's a measurable difference. We can measure it for the first time. And there are other benefits of having a platform that that we can curate our core text collection into one place. I'm old enough, believe it or not, to some of you maybe as well, to remember physical core text collections, or physical short loan collections, as we used to call them, where people would queue up on a Friday to get it out over the weekend because they used to be 24-hour loans or something like that. And here we've got a core text collection in one place, curated. We haven't got proprietary, like publisher proprietary interfaces to navigate. The students can add their own notes in one place and familiarity with one platform. It's also the same platform that that every other undergraduate in the university is using. So the core texts in one place, on one platform, everybody else is using it, everybody else is referring to it, and there is that sense of, community in terms of you're using this, I'm using it. They can also see through everybody else's textbooks in the main from most publishers. We've got agreement that for us that they can see all textbooks from all of the that we're buying. So all the 1,600, nearly 1,700 texts we've been buying for the across the university as a whole. Those are all cross-searchable and available for people to look at by and large. And obviously there are integrations that we've made, not just into the library catalogue, but also through course-specific reading lists and in our virtual learning environment. And I think that some of the features that are included in that, not just about the platform, has encouraged that engagement as well. So I think there is something about having a single platform. Obviously, we're using Bibliu, and I won't talk about the others, Dave, don't worry, but we're using Bibliu. But I think there's something about having a single platform that's really useful to the students. Clearly for us, it's this case study sort of shown that we have got engagement with what is a large investment for the university, that engagement is having a positive effect on attainment and student attainment. But there, it has highlighted for us at a more granular level than I think is in that report, some of the areas where we do need to focus and to encourage students to engage more, particularly if you look at one of the appendices, I think, where you can see the engagement by course and by faculty. It does kind of play out as you might imagine. So I think we have good engagement in FB, in our business faculty, not so good engagement in engineering, who I do joke with the Dean of Engineering that we really need to introduce his students to the book. The concept of an old technology, perhaps, that they could make use of. But it's about making sure that's useful for the course. That's the other thing. Okay, so I'm going to stop wittering on there and stop sharing. And I'm very happy to, I hope that everybody heard that. I'm very happy to take questions or make comments. Don't ask me to justify my 3.5, I say it's my 3.5 million spend. It is quite a lot of money, but there we are. And I think genuinely we've had, just to say, we've had really good engagement with BibliU. Dave doesn't pay me any money to say these things, would you believe? He must have brainwashed me. Because I do seem to be consistently, but I do advocate. I think some of the problems that I see as a library director in the sector, and I've seen over the last sort of sadly 20 odd years of my career, 25, oh God, it's been a long time now, 25 years perhaps, being a professional librarian. I think this type of platform certainly addresses some of the problems and issues we've had through that time.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Phil, for all the insight.